Okay. Okay. Hey there, Heather. Thank you so much for being with me on the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so excited to share time with you today. And I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. What a great title for a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Confident, sober woman, because it's so much more than being sober. It's totally empowering. And when you flex your sober muscle, you're also flexing your confidence muscle. So I think that's really cool. I'll give you a brief history about my background and my drinking. I was born in Wisconsin, and my parents met in a beer tent, and so I had my first drink at 12 years old, which seems alarmingly young to me now looking back. But in that environment, in that culture, in these families, it seemed normal, right? So it was just like a normal rite of passage, and I didn't know anything different. And so I drank through high school in barns and cornfields with friends. And then I drank in college with a fake ID, in dance clubs, and feeling very grown up and all that stuff. I met my husband in a bar in college, and then we moved to Chicago, where we were like young urban professionals. And now we drink with our coworkers at happy hours, and we were going to sporting events, and we could afford a little bit more expensive alcohol. And yeah, I felt kind of grown up, and we were sort of, playing house. We were going out, we were having a lot of fun. And then I quit drinking when I got pregnant with my first child. I didn't drink during the pregnancy, but as soon as she was born, I had a little wine in the afternoon, feeling very European. And there's so many things that say like alcohol helps your breast milk come in and all this stuff. So, of course, I was like keeping it in check. Went back to drinking and then had my second child. Also, didn't drink during that pregnancy, but again, when she was born, went back to drinking. And I was working part time. So I was a part time stay at home mom and a part time worker, and my husband was traveling a lot for work. So I was lonely. I had had this big social life all through my life. Friendship had always been really important to me. And then it sort of came to a crashing halt when I was home with young children and my husband was gone, and I was lonely and I was bored. And he was drinking at like private concerts and fancy dinners and um, like bottle service in Vegas and all the things. So his drinking was like awesome and rewarded and part of work. And I think I was jealous too. I think I was kind of jealous that I was doing bath time, dinner time, bedtime, that routine with young ones, which is a challenge. And so alcohol sort of made that a little more woozy, or made me feel like I was keeping some part of myself that I had had before motherhood, this party girl, a social part of myself. So when my youngest went to kindergarten, I ended up taking a big job that was in the city with a really long commute and long hours. And I had a team of people that reported to me. And my degree is in social work. But as soon as I moved to Chicago, I got into human resources. And for most of my career, I sold HR solutions. So for most of my career, I was also the only female on all male sales teams. So
Mm.
I was trying to keep up with the boys club, and I was drinking like the boys club, which was great for me because I'm from Wisconsin. I was like born and raised to do this, right? so,
Yes.
so I was burning the candle at both ends because I was trying to be everything at work with late nights and early mornings, and drinking sometimes felt like part of the job because you
Mhm.
had access to decision makers and access to leaders and stuff, maybe at a happy hour or a networking event that you wouldn't get in the office. And then I was coming home, having to do the whole shift at home, with young ones, and then waking up to do it all over again.
Mhm.
And it was becoming a lot. And then I was hit with three deaths in a row in a short period of time. Over 3 years, I did three eulogies. One was my dad, which was out of order and unexpected. And the other two were guy friends of mine that were my age, that again were tragic and unexpected and out of order, leaving families behind. And so my drinking at this point took a shift because I started drinking to self medicate my grief. Doing these eulogies, I really wanted to perform.
Mhm.
I have people pleasing tendencies, perfectionist tendencies, and I wanted to do a really good job at their services. So I set my feelings aside to perform. And I did a great job. I got great feedback. And I think I did do, a really wonderful job sharing their stories. And then afterwards, I told myself, well, get over it. It's over. Get over it. Just move on. And it was that not feeling that I was then drinking. I was then drinking my feelings. And so I was putting the kids to bed and then over drinking on the couch alone. My family was going upstairs, my husband was going upstairs, and I was just drinking in silence and alone. And this just started to escalate over time. And I noticed, I started to like not recognize myself in the mirror. I started to have a lot of anxiety, panic attacks when I was driving. I was very disconnected from myself and I was starting to be scared, afraid. So I called my employee assistance program, like in an emergency panic, wanting to talk to a substance use therapist. And through all this rigmarole and all these messages and all this back and forth, it was finally like, okay, we'll see you in 3 weeks.
Mm.
It's just like, I was calling, it was like my 911 call,
I
right?
didn't even
So,
know.
okay, I'll talk to you in 3 weeks. So I went and I said, I think I have a problem with drinking. And the therapist said, no, you don't. You just have a problem with anxiety. I don't think this is everyone's experience, although I do know other people have had this experience.
Yes.
So she put me on anxiety meds and told me I could keep drinking. And I was so relieved. Hallelujah. Great. Amazing. Awesome. A professional just told me I didn't have a problem. This is great. So now I was taking the meds and I
Mhm.
kept drinking, and this really changed the game. I turned into a walking blackout on more than one occasion.
Mm.
It was like no longer predictable the effect of that alcohol was going to have on me. And so it was through a series of experiments, of sober experiments, periods of time not drinking, going back to drinking, drinking, going back to drinking, because I was trying very hard to keep alcohol in my life. I didn't want to be a sober person at all. I really wanted to project manage and micromanage this lifelong habit that I had and a big, huge part of my identity. But when I started my first sober experiment, I went for 100 days alcohol free.
Mhm.
I made it to 70 days and I was like, perfect, I'm cured. Obviously, I'm just going to like be a normal drinker now, right? And so I went back to drinking and it escalated, and then periods of drinking, not drinking. I think you've probably heard that story before. But I'll tell you, it planted a seed in me. That first failed experiment planted a seed in me. And I started to develop and cultivate a relationship with myself that I never had. When my head hit the pillow at night, even if it was hard to turn down a drink or hard to not drink or, um, different and awkward and uncomfortable, I was proud of me. I felt like I was aligned with me. And I had not felt that before. I had felt a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of frustration and confusion about me and what was happening in my relationship with alcohol kind of always scared me because I always liked it. And my dad was a bartender who I say brought his work home. So he was like what society would call an alcoholic. And that was what I didn't want to be. My parents divorced and when I was very young. And in my mind, it was because of alcohol. So like my dad was the bad guy and alcohol was the bad thing. And he quit drinking by the time I was 5 years old. So, I don't have memories of him drinking or anything, but I always knew like, oh, he was bad and he was bad with alcohol. And, that's why he doesn't drink because it was something was wrong with him. Right. Well, so it was my biggest fear. And then here I was also having an issue with alcohol. But in February 20th of 2018, I set down the drink. I was out to dinner with my husband. I was between jobs. I was totally miserable. And he basically said the alcohol wasn't helping me. And I was so mad at him for saying that. And the truth is, we were both confused because even though I was drinking too much and it was starting to be really noticeable, I was also the first one up in the morning. I was sweeping the floors. I was making lunches. I was not that bad. And that kept me from being amazing. Like this question of like, I'm not that bad. It was just very confusing. Like, is it a problem or isn't? And is it so drastic to have to quit or maybe just try to manage it? There were all these things. So, um, anyways, I I set down my glass of wine and walked away from that dinner. I'd never not finished a glass of wine in my entire life. I've probably never not finished a bottle of wine in my entire life. So this was like a big deal. But I sort of did it in anger. I sort of did it like, oh, I'll show you. Because I thought the problem was our marriage. I thought the problem was I'm doing everything. And it was a fair play situation. And I was just resentful, angry, confused, obviously, as you can hear. So I set down that glass of wine and I woke up the next morning and I fell to my knees and I said, I have to quit drinking and I could use your help. And he was so grateful,
Mm.
to have some direction and to help me because he didn't know how to help me. But I said, can you just not drink with me for the first week or so? And like, I really have to give this a real try. And I had no idea if a life of sobriety would be for me or if this would work or if it would make me happy. But I knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing.
Right.
It was mostly just like a not this. This isn't working. And I have no idea if quitting is going to work, but this will never be the future. And I thought with him or without him, I have to quit drinking. Like there's no future for me to keep drinking. This is killing me slowly. This is going to take my life. It's hijacked my brain and it's starting to take over. And I can't do this anymore. And so I quit. I had no idea if that was going to last, but day by day, step by step, I'm almost 6 years sober now. So from there, I obviously got sober and then I couldn't do those jobs. I didn't want to do those jobs. So I put everything I learned into a digital class called Ditch the Drink Jumpstart because I liked this modern sobriety, this patchwork of tools and recovery. And what worked for me wasn't out there at the time. And so I put my own program together and I have this holistic way of healing. And so I wanted to share that with other like high achieving professional women like me. So I put that class together. And then through a series of serendipity, I got connected with the International Association of Professional Recovery Coaches and I became a certified coach. And now that's what I do full time. And I've expanded my offerings. I have a membership, I have one-on-one coaching. And now I also coach coaches, teach them how to launch a business. And it's really grown, but it was birthed through my own experience and creating something that I needed when I was wobbly and confused.
Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing all that and being so honest and vulnerable with your experience. I mean, this is truly how it works, right? I mean, when we can share with another sober person about our experience and what happened for us and then what it's like today, it really is life-changing and helping other people to know there's hope. That's why most of us are here, right? Because and why we speak up and why we create businesses and write books because there is so much hope and joy in recovery, in a life of sobriety that is impossible to understand, in my opinion, if you're in active addiction or close to it. You just can't see. It's almost like children. You have children. I have 3 older teenagers now, and sometimes we would get really frustrated, particularly my husband, around like finances, and like, why can't they understand this is so, this is expensive or take care of their things or whatever. And I would say to him, they can't know because they don't know what it's like to look at a checkbook and see red, or the pressure of paying a mortgage and tuition and all these. They've never had that. So they
Mm-hmm.
can't possibly know what we know. And it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the same thing, right? Like we can't know how much joy, how much fun, how much community and friendship and fellowship we can have in this alcohol-free life because we've never done it.
Yeah. That's why all of us, many of us, I think almost everybody that's been through it is turning around and holding their hand for somebody. We all want to do that because we want to show. And I think it was Claire Pooley, an
Mhm.
author, who said it
Mhm.
best of like sobriety is like an obstacle course. And the first 90 days is like a 12-foot wall that you have to scale. And then after that is maybe like some hurdles. And then there's a field of daisies. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know. This is my interpretation of whatever
Right.
I think she said. I think she started with this idea. So I don't want to take credit for it. And also, I'm probably making it up as I go along, but it's true. So I always say, too, the people that do dry January or sober October, it's amazing. I did those things. 30 days is a long time. I totally get it because one day is a long time, 4 days is a long time. But if you keep doing that, you're doing the hardest part over and over again, and you're not really reaping the benefits that actually come. you're still just like repairing your physical systems. So you don't feel as good as you're going to feel when your brain starts to make its own happiness chemicals. And that takes a little more time, right? Because for 30 days, it's still waiting for you to have some alcohol. It's still waiting for that artificial hit. But when you truly heal your body, your spirit, your mind, your relationships, like 90 days and beyond, it's you feel so much better and your internal childlike joy returns. And if you've been drinking for a long time, you maybe have forgotten what it feels like to just wake up and feel good, right? To wake up and not punch yourself in the face first thing.
And I
And
would argue with you
so,
honestly that it takes a lot longer than that. It really takes closer to like a year, because 30 days, yes, you go to maybe you go to treatment or you do a dry January, but that's as sober as you're ever going to get. That is as sober as your body will ever be after 30 days. But what's left is all of the rest of the stuff. And I got sober in AA back, 2 decades ago because that's all we had, right? And they say things like. The alcohol is but a symptom. And I personally very much agree with that, because that wasn't really the problem. And so when we strip away the alcohol and drugs, and then we're just left with like our shell as a person, who is unmanageable, incapable of dealing with emotions, they don't even know what they like or who they are or how to run their lives. I mean, I had to do things like really relearn everything. I was like an infant. I had to relearn how to brush my teeth twice a day and feed myself properly, and not be on the treadmill for 2 hours a day, things like that. I mean, because I didn't have any life skills when it came to managing emotions or dealing with my past or any of that stuff. So it really takes 90 days is great. Yeah, you get over that huge hurdle, but that whole first year, and I don't know what your experience is like. I know mine was, and most of the women that I work with, is such a kind of a tumultuous time because everything is new. You're doing all of the firsts. We were talking about holidays. You're going through your first holidays, your first weddings, your first kids thing, where you're not using alcohol or drugs to self-soothe or to manage the anxiety of those events, things like that. And it's very challenging.
yeah,
Um, and then when we get past that year, which is where I kind of love to meet women, I love to meet them right around that, like after they've been sober for a year to many years, and they kind of wake up. You're like
yeah,
you're awakening to your own life, and also to the possibilities that are there for you. I mean, as high achieving professional women in particular, you may not even have scratched the surface on what you're capable of because of the limitations of addiction, right?
hmm,
You might have barely been accessing parts of your brain or your creativity or your capability just because you didn't think you could. You didn't have the confidence, or you just weren't giving yourself the space to even realize such things. And now when we start to wake up to life, desires of our heart start to bubble up, right? Those things that bring you joy start to come back. And if they don't, we can at least poke around a little and say, what did you used to like, as a kid, and then start to discover like where that's going to lead you now into the future. I don't know if that's relatable to you, but
yeah, totally. I always tease, well, I'm a certified recovery coach and a certified life coach. So I tease my clients, I'm like, come for the recovery coaching, ditch the drink, stay for the life coaching. Because after you ditch the drink, you look up and you're like, well, I don't really like my job, or these patterns in my family are not working for me. Or like,
exactly.
wow, I need boundaries in those friendships. How am I supposed to do that? So it is this process of awakening for sure. And the first year is all the firsts. And so that is hard, but also that's not a preview of a life of sobriety. That's just hard. It's hard to do anything new the first time, right? That feels uncomfortable. But with practice, so like year two, it's like it's not a thing to not have alcohol, let's say, because you've practiced that. So you're not so hypersensitive to the alcohol. You're more, yes, working on yourself and peeling the layers and getting a little bit deeper. But for me too, my emotions, I was like a toddler, I say, throwing temper tantrums. Like I poured alcohol on everything. So I didn't know how to manage my very big feelings and my very huge emotions. And it was a process of ditching the drink was really a process of self-discovery for me,
Yeah.
of tuning in and figuring out what is it that I want. And I was so used to ignoring myself and telling myself I was wrong, however I felt. If I was mad about something, I'd say, don't be mad about that. Oh, you shouldn't be mad about that. Right. To be listening and saying, I am mad about this. So what am I going to do about that? I'm allowed to feel anger. It's got to come up and out of me. Do I need to journal? Do I need some movement? Do I need to vent to a friend? Do I need to address the person I'm angry at? Like, I'm allowed to feel this. And how am I going to manage that? And it's very clunky at first, and it's not smooth and it's not graceful. And I probably went to one extreme or the other as I was trying to figure it out. But through sobriety, I have learned how to take care of myself.
I agree. And that's where that piece of emotional sobriety comes in, excuse me, after we do stay sober for a little bit of time. Yes, you're not pining away for a drink necessarily, but life keeps happening. So I don't care if you're 2 years or 10 years or 15 years sober. Like I was when I was parenting my teenagers, it was extremely difficult. We went through some very, very difficult times that were traumatic, very hard on our marriage. And I had been sober for quite some time, done a ton of therapy, lots of work, but those were new. That was all new for me. And those experiences of, I don't know what to do. I have no
Hmm.
idea how to handle this. I can get good counsel, but I still don't know what the right thing is, or this is so painful that I feel like my heart is being ripped out, or you talked about the losses you experienced. We all are going to have losses at different times. And you might have that a little bit further down into your sobriety journey, but that might be the first time you really, or it might not even be the first, but maybe it's a major loss for you. And it's like, holy smokes, I don't know how to handle all of this deep sadness, and your first art, I believe our natural way is to want to get rid of that as
Hmm.
addicts and alcoholics. I just think that we want, and maybe all humans, we don't like discomfort in that way. And so we're
Yeah,
going
we're
to look
looking to
for,
escape pain. I think that's
we want to
always.
get rid of it.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. I think though that, and we can talk about this with the holidays coming up because the holidays bring up a lot of emotion and a lot of grief, anyways. It can be a time of nostalgia. It can be a time of celebration. It can be a time of extra indulgence with alcohol and all that. But yeah, you have to learn to take care of yourself and you have to find other tools. And it is natural to want to escape pain. So, also, I think changing the voice in your head from an inner critic to cultivating compassion, right? And now I look back and say, of course you drank. Of course you went to that. Like, I don't beat myself up about that anymore because anyone in my position would have done the same thing. It was actually resourceful of me, right? It was actually what a right thing to do. And it kind of worked until it didn't, right? And then, of course, alcohol is an addictive substance. So, of course, I became addicted with use. Like, that is what would happen. And
Yes.
so, yeah, thank goodness I got out and this whole new life I've been awakened to. But the holidays, I mean, that brings up everything.
Yeah, I want to
So
get into
here we
it.
are
Let's
going
talk
into
about
the
it.
season.
Yeah, we're getting ready to getting ready to step into those holidays, depending on when this comes out. But it's a long season, right? I mean, it's a definite month and a half long of all the things. And then depending on which space of time of life you're in, or what kind of jobs you have, or who you're married to. In my case, I have a high level executive husband who requires us to go to these events that are not my speed necessarily, that require fancy outfits and high heels, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just not my jam. But
Small talk.
yeah, I don't mind small talk. I love talking to people, but the outfit situation is just hard for me because these women
Mm,
are all stunning and they have great clothes, and I just always feel like I'm a sore thumb, but I'm gonna do my best anyway. So but if they're all drinking, of course, and it's the things, it's all
mhm.
of the things, and I'm not a person that really wants to fake it. And so then I have to make sure that I prepare myself for that. I need to be in a good space to be able to enter into that environment where I can be my authentic self. Right. So maybe it means I take a nap beforehand, or I give myself a little extra time, or I maybe, just a little self care, just a way to like help me get into a good headspace before I even enter into that room. Because I don't want to come off as somebody who doesn't want to be there, or fake. I want to smile. I want to feel joy and look like I'm happy to be there. And generally
Mhm.
I probably am. But so how do you help your clients, or how have you, maybe you could share your experience, even dealt with throughout your last 6 years, holiday times, both business and professionally?
Yeah. So I love what you said, like preparing and being in the right headspace. And so I think that's really important. And I work with my clients and we make a success plan for each day, for each week, for each event, depending on where they're at and what's going on. But we have a specific and exact success plan for them that we come up with together. I mean, they come up with the plan, but I say like, and what about this? And what about that? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Oh, I didn't think about that. Like, you're going to bring your alcohol-free drinks or something. It's like, okay, when would you get those? Oh, I don't have time to do that. Okay. Like we got to think through this a little bit further to really nail down what the plan is. But starting with preparing yourself and preparing your insides. I like that, what you said, because whatever is going to be happening in the outside world, it could be triggering, it could bring a craving, it could be stressful, it could get anxiety, whatever. But keeping your inner compass, at a true north, the way you want it, and preparing, visualizing, how do I want to show up here? What is my gift to offer? And cultivating that within yourself. And for me, that's usually like a journaling and a meditation, but it could be anything. Maybe somebody needs to do a yoga class that morning to put themselves in the right space. Maybe it's reading from a daily devotional to give an intention. There's a lot of ways to do it, but settling the insides, I always say, like one of my daughters plays soccer. And when I don't know anything about soccer, so please don't ask. But even though I've been watching it like my whole life, but the first thing you have to do is settle the ball. Like when it comes to you, you have to settle the ball before you can kick it, before you make a plan. And I feel like that's what we have to do with ourselves. Before we go into those stressful situations, we need to settle the ball. We need to settle our insides and do some sort of grounding so that we are in the right headspace and we are taking care of ourselves and we can present as we want to. And setting yourself up for success could mean literally putting your feet on the ground, right? I already gave some ideas, but it can also mean boundaries of saying, I'm going to stay until 9 p.m. and then I'm going to go, or I'm going to drive separate because although I want to attend this with you and I support you in doing this, I'm not going to want to stay after a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And especially where people are drinking, I know when it's time for me to check out. It's no longer fun for me when we're not on the same page, when we're speaking a different language, right? After 2-3 drinks, this is no longer, we're not in the same space right now. So it's time for me to go, right? So it could be boundaries would be included in that. And then if you have something special to drink, whether that is a club soda with cranberries, right? Or a special garnish, or you bring your own, or you want an alcohol-free beer or wine, if that's a tool and not a trigger for you, how can you make it special for you? And then come home and have a reward. Maybe that's ice cream. Maybe that's your favorite book. Maybe that's your very expensive candle that you want to light before bed. But give yourself a reward for getting through a situation. And not going is always an option, I would say. So truly, if you don't want to be there, you don't have to go. And just because you've always done it, or just because it's part of tradition, that can change. So it is okay to say no.
Yeah, I love all of this and I want to dig into some of it. And I want to really touch on personal stuff with family and also this professional piece. And since I led it with the professional piece, I'll just dig in a little bit more. But I think one of the things that's really important too, that I find that helps me and I recommend to my clients is to kind of check in with yourself about why you're doing this. So if you're a professional person or you're married or partnered up with somebody and you need to go to these kinds of events, and most of us probably know what we're talking about. This one particularly, this is like a bank event. And so bank people are fancy. And I didn't really know that. So last year I was like I wasn't as prepared as I would have appreciated. And it was fine. It's fine. But I felt like the entire time I was feeling a little insecure. I could feel a little of insecurity coming in because I didn't feel like I looked my best that I could have looked for these particular people. Now that's not really that important. It's not a big deal. But this year now I'm more prepared and I'm like, okay, I know what this event is about. And so, but asking questions like, why am I attending this is really important. So like for me, with this particular event, I'm attending it because I really want to support my spouse. He doesn't need me to go, and he's asked, "Do you want to go?" You don't have to. I want to support him. I think it's nice for him. He likes me to go. I also wanted to go for me because it is a network opportunity for me as well for my business and for just to meet people and be in community with, to talk about things because sometimes things come up, about alcohol-free stuff, and it's surprising how frequently that does happen. So it is a network opportunity for me as well. So, but if I ask myself that question, and next year could be a different phase, and I couldn't get to a space where I felt like these were positive responses that I was giving myself. Like, well, I'm going because I feel like I have to. Or if I don't go, somebody will be mad at me, or they won't like me, or I won't get the job. Then I think that's a different set of circumstances. And you really need to dig into what that's telling you,
Mhm.
and try to listen to it. We do all have choices today, whatever they are, and that we don't always like them, but we do all have choices in all things. So that's the beautiful thing about being sober too, is we get to decide how we spend our life. And if things are coming up for you that don't seem in alignment with your particular core values or who you want to show up as a person, then it might be something you should skip that year. Um, and this goes for family events too. I think family creates a different set of stuff. We all have traditions and problem family members, and we all have, some of us might be dealing with insecurities or shame and guilt that's not just quite healed yet, and that's all fair. And so having a plan, preparation is the key to success, right? Having a plan for any of these things is critical. When will we arrive? What time will we leave? What is your plan? Do I drive separate? I love all of that. I think that's really appropriate. And then sometimes we don't do the thing, um, which can be really hard. And I don't know if you've experienced that personally, or you've had worked with anybody who's had to kind of choose, no as the answer to
Yeah.
something that was really difficult.
Yeah, totally. So for the workplace stuff, I will say if you are in a position to request an alcohol-free drink that is not a juice box or tap water or even Diet Coke, which let's be honest, Diet Coke is freaking amazing. But if you have an option to a sophisticated and fun signature drink that could be had without alcohol, do it. We need to change this in the workplace. We need to have options available. And the facts are a third of the population doesn't drink at all. So you are not alone. And the facts are also when people are in a work environment, they feel pressure to drink when they don't want to, or drink more than they would, or they'll have one when they really want none. So
Hmm.
you can be an advocate for alcohol-free drinks. And some people aren't drinking for a reason or a season, or, some are in recovery. Some it's because of religion, some it's health goals, some it's medication they're on or a certain stage of motherhood. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't drink, and we need to have options available. So together, let's change the world and make
Yes.
it a safe, inclusive, belonging place, whether you drink or not. Alcohol doesn't have to be the bonding activity. The activity can be the bonding activity, right? So think about that. If you can speak up, if you have a voice, use it because other people also want it. And then corporate gifting. Who are we to be sending bottles of wine to people? That's really making a big assumption, and it's truly poison. So we could be gifting with so many other things, right? So, and in a work environment, really consider the place of alcohol. And the truth is, the effects of alcohol in the workplace are all negative. It increases sexual harassment, it decreases productivity, it takes away from the bottom line. There's more absenteeism, more workers' comp situations. So it's all a negative thing. So it's okay to speak up about that. In
Hmm.
a personal situation, yeah, traditions can change, and that's hard. And I always say, if you think you're healed and evolved, go home to your family. You'll turn into a 16-year-old brat if you're me. It's very easy to slip into those old roles, and it's hard to make changes with our family who's known us our whole life, and they might have something to say about it. Even when they're well intentioned, it can be a real challenge. But it is our one job in life is to take care of ourselves. So that's not somebody else's job. That's not your mom's job or your husband's job or your daughter's job or your brother's job, right? It's your job to take care of yourself. So that means tuning in and doing what's right for you, whether or not anybody agrees. And that's where it's hard because I think we want approval and acceptance from the entire world. We never want to disappoint the people that we love, but we're going to. We're going to. Of course we are. That's an expectation that we wouldn't is completely unreasonable. You're definitely going to disappoint people. Don't disappoint yourself. And Glennon Doyle is the one that said that.
Yes.
You have to stop abandoning yourself. And alcohol was my number one tool for self abandonment. It was a way to tolerate situations I really didn't want to be in. I would just pour alcohol in it. And I'm sure you did too, right? So we sat through these networking events. We did this family stuff that we don't want to do. And we did it with alcohol because we were just tolerating it. When you get sober, you don't tolerate your life anymore. You freaking love your life. And if you don't, you do something, you change it. Now, there's good days, bad days, life happens. It's, of course, life is lifey, but you create a life that you love. You create a life you're not going to pour alcohol on just to numb yourself through. That is not what our purpose is here on this earth. So you have to make yourself happy, no matter what that means. And also, if you skip this year, it doesn't mean you're going to skip
Right.
forever. It
Nothing's
means this
permanent.
might be a temporary thing. It might be this one event. It might be this one year. It might be this one time. And also, really beautiful things happen. Like creativity is birthed from new things. So, like we had friends over for a football game, and there wasn't alcohol, and it got kind of boring for a minute, and we were all like, "Okay, what are we doing here?" So I ended up pulling out some games. And what ended up happening is I taught my entire friend circle how to play euchre. So now we have a card club. Now we have a weekly card club, and it is so much fun. And
Oh,
that was birthed through like trying something different and boredom and discomfort. Then we birthed this brand new thing. So I have a neighborhood card club, and it's so much fun. So
yeah.
let something new develop too. Let something new birth. If you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else.
I love that so much. And you can't have the space for the yes if you're not willing to say no, or to at least consider other options, because we're always, we're filled up. So I agree with you. Creativity is so dependent, I think, on open space, on a little bit of boredom. That I have a friend of mine who's an artist. She's not in recovery, but she's a real artist. She taught school for 31 years, and she always says, she's 10 years older than me too, so she grew up in a different time. But she said we were bored. There was no phones or hardly TV or whatever, and we were home alone a lot. Our parents were working, so she was drawing, she was doodling. And that's what she said, that art, most people can get kind of good at art, but they don't create any space for that. They're not sitting around doing it. And I thought that was profound for me. I thought, because I always just assumed everybody was naturally talented. Now I'm sure some people are, but a lot of it can be kind of self-taught or improved through just doing it.
Yeah,
It's so
space
cool.
and practice. And it's okay to sit with the discomfort,
Yes.
right? It's okay to not feel comfortable for a minute. And like setting a boundary can be really uncomfortable. You
Yeah.
can say, thank you for the invite, but we're not going to attend this year.
Yeah.
And then
And I
you want
think
to fill
boundaries.
that space with something like, I'm sorry, or maybe we will, or we'll come for a little bit,
Exactly.
or, because it's so uncomfortable. But you can just sit and let somebody else be uncomfortable. Let yourself be uncomfortable. You can
Yes.
move through that.
That's one of the biggest challenges I see with women that I work with. I'm sure you do too. Is the constant need to explain themselves, and I think it's starting to shift. I see there's a change happening in these next generations, or as us as older women who are teaching these things, that we don't have to have an explanation or an excuse for anything, unless you really want to. You care about the other person and you want them to know something more about yourself. But if you don't, it's perfectly comfortable to just say, no, period. Like no is a complete
Yeah.
sentence. And there's no reason to be rude or disrespectful or any of that. That's not what boundaries are. And I think sometimes people get a little confused, like it's going to be this big conflict. And it's really not. It's you just really honoring and respecting yourself enough to say, this doesn't fit into my life right now.
Yeah.
Or, we don't choose to spend our time this way this year. And and being giving yourself permission to do that is a huge part of like thriving in long-term recovery. I mean, this is just part of the emotional sobriety work that we get to live in when we stay sober longer. You know,
Hmm.
we just get to do the work that makes us better, on the
Yeah.
inside.
I love that. And you touched on that earlier too. So I do want to say, like, you don't arrive
Hmm.
at sobriety. You're not like at the top of the mountain. Like it's not at year 1 or year 5 or year 20 that you're like, okay, I've got it. I'm good now.
Right.
We're you do get to the top of that mountain and you look up and there's another one. So it's like you're always in process. We're humans in process. You're never, I mean, as long as we're living, we're growing, learning beings.
Totally.
So also I think remove like the idea of like, I'm good now or I've made it, in some way, because just when you do that, life is going to kick you and remind you, like it can come at any time and you're reminded of, I still have some work to do. I still have some development. but it's work you want to do, right? Because it's healing work.
Right.
And with the boundaries, even saying I don't drink is a boundary.
Yes.
And boundaries, I think we're confused because we think it's about other people sometimes. We think
Yes.
like, I'm not going to let them talk me into that, or I'm going to make her call mom.
Mm.
I'm going to make her call mom. That's my boundary. That's not a boundary. The boundary is about you. It's not about them. So you're going to say, I'm not going to talk to her until she calls mom, and then you're going to tell her, I'm not, whatever, or whatever your situation is. It's about what your actions are. It's about what you're going to do. It's not what somebody else is going to do. And then it might be consequence depending on someone does, right? Like if you say that again, if you raise your voice, I'm going to hang up.
Exactly.
And then you hang up. It's not that they're not going to raise their voice. They're going to do whatever they want to do. You're not controlling them. You're controlling you.
This is a whole nother podcast episode because it is a profound thing for people. When I teach that to women and I say that, I said, well, the next time she calls you, you need to say to her, it sounds like you're getting really negative right now. And I just don't want that to be in my space. So I'm going to have to let you go. When I tell someone that they're allowed to do that with someone like their mother or someone close to them,
Yeah.
it's like, it's so profound to them. They can't
That
even
they have
understand.
permission to take care of
Yeah.
themselves.
And I'm
They
like,
have permission to own that situation and
right,
their
like
reaction.
you didn't call her a name. You didn't say she
Right.
was a nasty bee. You just said,
Yeah.
I can't continue this conversation while you're speaking to me that way. I would love to do that when you're calmed down.
Yeah.
And it's, and again, at first it's uncomfortable, right? And I always
Mm-hmm.
sometimes still get a little like that little stomach feeling of like a little, oh, but
Mm-hmm.
generally I'm much better at it these days. But with practice, it gets better. And frankly, what you're almost doing is you're honoring and respecting yourself, but you're also training other people how you want to be treated. And so then
Mm-hmm.
that other person or people will either choose to do something different. Now this takes time usually, and sometimes it gets worse before it gets better because they'll say, well, gee, my thing isn't working anymore. She's not responding. And so then they ramp up, and so it might take a hot minute. But oftentimes that person, particularly if it's somebody close to you, will make a change and they'll stop doing that behavior because they're no longer getting anything from it and you're shutting them down.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing once you
It
get a hold of it.
is. Yeah.
But the
And I
holidays is a
noticed
great
too, I was
opportunity.
allowing what I was allowing to happen because I was full of guilt and shame about my drinking. So people can treat me this way, or I'll just do this because I'm trying to make up for the fact.
Yeah.
So even in my family, my beautiful, supportive, wonderful family, they had to get retrained too,
Yes.
right? When
Exactly.
I started to heal and up level my own self-worth, we had to change some habits and some patterns and some ways of being in our whole house
Hmm.
that weren't going to work anymore because I wasn't going to be talked to that way. And I wasn't going to pick up everybody else's mess. And I wasn't going to tell myself I was wrong all the time. I'm not wrong all the time. It looks like you guys have some things to work on, right?
I think where people get confused is this. I think sometimes we think we then have to go into this like teaching mode to the other person. We have to say, it looks like you guys need to do some work. We don't have to do any of that. That's either going to happen organically and naturally through your change, or it doesn't happen. And then you get to decide, does this person get to stay in my life or not? Or how do we do things now? You just made me think of like when all the kids were here. I mean, I've been sober for a long time, so this isn't like it wasn't like a new sobriety thing, but like I was a stay-at-home mom I was working, then I was a stay-at-home mom for a bunch of years, and then I started my own practice and slowly went back and things. And so my time shifted, right? I wasn't available to just jump up. I mean, my kids are my priority, but particularly as they were getting older, and they would call, they would text and say, can you pick me up, or can you do, or they'd change the plan or whatever. And there was often a lot of times where I just said, no, I'm not available, even if I was, because I just needed them to know you don't get to just change the plan. We already had a plan. You said pick you up at 12, and now you're saying pick you up at 2 or pick me up at 11. And I'm like, no, we already made a plan. So it was like I sometimes did it as a practice for myself to just say, no, I respect myself too much to rearrange things just because you've asked me. And even though you're my child and I love you and want to support and help you, if it's not an emergency, I mean, obviously, but
Right.
yeah, I had to
Yeah,
work
with
hard on that.
working with new coaches, I say that too. They have a hard time like getting stuff done. And I say, what are your workouts? Where are you working?
Yeah.
Because and the thing is, you need to do it before any money comes in. Let's say if you're building a practice, you work it out and say, I'm going to work in these hours and I'm going to this coffee shop, or I'm locking myself in this room and I won't
Yeah.
be bothered.
Exactly.
and you have to train your family, but you have to start with saying, I'm working. I'm a
Yeah.
coach and I'm working. And that's before you have clients when you're just building something, right? But you have to set the stage for what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And when I do that, they're like, oh my gosh, since I've started calling it work,
Right.
I suddenly have, I'm getting stuff done. It's happening. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
you tell yourself first that
I
these
love
are
that.
your work hours, and you get your family to work around it, because how would you be successful without it? How would you ever find a client or meet with a client if you can't do this little homework assignment that I just gave you? Right.
Yeah. I
Like,
love that. Well, I really feel like we've touched on a ton of stuff here, which is so helpful for anybody listening, particularly around the holidays coming up, because we do know that we're going to be faced with, no matter how long you've been sober, or you're sober curious, or you've been sober for a long time, we're going to be faced with different challenges. Maybe it's within your own little intimate family, or maybe it's with your extended family, or your corporation, or your workplace, whatever it is. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for you to practice, the skill building of using your boundaries, as well as really good self care and tuning into the self,
mhm,
about what it is you want slash need in any given moment, so that you can show up as your authentic, confident, sober woman self in
mhm,
any of the environments that you are going to be in. And so I'd encourage you to really look hard at that, ask those hard questions of yourself before, kind of saying yes, or before you even go into an event or a party. And then also make a plan. It could just be a loose plan, whether maybe this is an old hat for you and you've been doing it for a long time, but just still have a little bit of a plan. Like, we're going to go for around this amount of time, or I'm going to have this person with me. When I'm ready to leave, I'm just going to like indicate to them, hey, I'm going to head out. And whether that means you leave by yourself or you leave with your group, whatever that looks like, but kind of just know. And I always recommend people have like a point person too. Like, maybe you have somebody that you can call. I mean, maybe you're not like in danger of picking up a drink or a drug, but you just need to talk to somebody because you're feeling like the spiral. You can
mhm,
start to feel it happen, and you're like, maybe you need to call your friend Heather and just
mhm.
say, hey, or text and just say, I'm really struggling, and let her respond back to you and kind of support you in that moment. So it's nice to have that person kind of in your thoughts too. Um, so I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And um, I know my community is going to really relate to all of this as well. So where can people find you if they want to reach out? Where do you hang out the most?
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for the opportunity. I think you summarized that so beautifully, so perfectly, for the holidays and beyond. I'm at ditchedthedrink.com. So that's my website. I have a free sober secrets guide and a little coaching video. I have a complimentary call. I do, like I said, recovery and life coaching. So if anyone's interested in that, I also have the digital jumpstart class. I have a weekly newsletter. I have a very robust blog. If anybody is old school like me and still likes to read blogs and stories, I that really helped me and was a tool in my sober journey. So I offer that to others. I have yeah, and if anyone's interested in recovery and is interested in also becoming a coach, I partner with the International Association of Professional Recovery Coaches. So I recruit people to be coaches. I teach them how to run their business. And one other thing is we have a course that can teach you how to facilitate addiction awareness in the workplace. So
Wow.
if you have an organization or you're feeling a little emboldened and you want to maybe change what that holiday party looks like for your company,
Nice.
you can get trained and learn how to do that through that organization as well. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest,
Okay, cool.
not TikTok. Don't look for me there. But
I'll make sure I link it all below so anyone wants to reach out. And I'm really thankful for your time, and I hope you have a fantastic